Lesson 6 in Module 4 is on the solutions of a linear equation. So we've worked on solving, talked about what a solution is. Now we're going to start getting into the types of solutions, I guess. Couple things we want to remember. So, get this to work here. If we talk about a linear equation, you see the word line right there, okay? If we were to graph a linear equation, which we will at some point, the graph is a straight line. And the second thing, if you're just looking at the equation, not looking at a graph, the x term or the variable term, I'm just going to say x term, but I mean any variable term, is to the first power. Okay, so when we're talking about solutions to linear equations, a linear equation is this type of thing. If we were to graph it like we will, it'll be a straight line. All the variable terms are going to be to the first power. Remember a couple things we talked about in our last lesson about solving? Squeeze it in right here. Remember, we have to simplify each side. That's going to be big today. Simplify each side. And then once that is done, gather all x terms, again, variable terms, all x terms on one side. Okay, so we're talking about linear equations. This is what we're going to do to solve our linear equations. And then we're going to see what type of solutions we're getting. And that'll make more sense in a little bit. So it says find the value of x that makes the equations true. Okay, so when I look at this, I see a lot of minus signs, I see a lot of negatives. So I'm going to rewrite it, but I'm going to rewrite it with addition. So I'm going to rewrite this as 17, instead of minus 5, I'm going to say plus a negative 5 times the quantity, 2x. Instead of minus 9, I'm going to say plus a negative 9. And that's going to equal, well, I'm going to rewrite this as a negative 1. I'm going to put a 1 in here, times negative 6x plus 10, and then plus 4. So these are going to be overwhelming. We have to take it step by step. We have to simplify each side first. So that's what we're going to do. And a key to today's lesson is the distributive property. So sorry this is kind of crooked here, but remember, following order of operations, do our grouping signs, nothing we can do in parentheses, do powers or exponents, none of that there. And then we do multiplication and division from left to right. And a big idea is to use the distributive property. The distributive property is going to allow you to see your terms better. So I'm going to suggest you do the distributive property a lot. Don't add these together. Addition and subtraction come at the end. All right, so here's what I get. We're going to have 17 plus negative 5 times 2x. Well, negative times a positive is negative. 5 times 2 is 10. So this is going to become a negative 10x plus negative 5 times negative 9. So negative times a negative is a positive. 5 times 9 is 45. Okay, see how it's starting to make it a little bit easier by doing those things? Then we come to our other side, and I'm going to do the same thing. I want to distribute. Negative 1 times negative 6. Negative times a negative is a positive. 1 times 6 is 6. Plus negative 1 times 10. So negative 1 times 10 is going to be a negative 10. And then I have my plus 4. That's outside the parentheses. I'm not going to use my distributive property. Guys, something I want you to think of is a lot of times we try to do a lot in our head. And we sit there, we're really thinking hard. It's actually easier to write up all the steps because you're not trying to remember things. And these equations here, you do not want to try to do them in your head. All right, let's keep going. Okay, now let's just look. We're looking at each side. Oh, that was awful. I'm going to cheat a little bit here. Okay, so we're looking at each side of our equal sign. So if I look over here to the left, my like terms are 17 and 45. I can combine those. So I'm going to have negative 10x plus, if I combine 17 and 45, I get 62. That's going to equal, now on our right side here, I can combine negative 10 and 4. So this becomes 6x plus, if I combine those two, a negative 6. Sorry, that was a negative 62 over there. You see, each step we take, the problem gets a little bit easier, and then they start looking more familiar. So I've now simplified each side. Now we're going to gather all our x terms up on one side. So you can go either way. I think I'm going to choose to subtract 6x because I like dealing with my variable on the left, but it doesn't really matter. So again, sorry, I got just interrupted, but you can go either way. I like dealing with my x values on the left side, so I'm going to subtract 6 over here. But if you wanted to add 10x to both sides, you can. Notice, I know we want to multiply and divide, but not until our x terms are all on one side. So now if I combine negative 10x and negative 6x, I get a negative 16x, combining, adding them together. Both negatives stay negative. And then I bring down my plus 62 equals, that gives me 0, and our negative 6. Now, remember all the practicing we did on two-step equations? We're down to a two-step equation. I'm solving for my x term, so I'm going to get rid of whatever's being added to it. In this case, it's 62, so I'm going to subtract 62. Whatever I do to one side, I do to the other. I bring down my negative 16x. This is 0 equals 6 plus a negative 62. It's a negative 68. I'm struggling to write some 6's here. All right, I'm going to bring this up here. So I have negative 16x equals a negative 68. Now remember, this is multiplying, so I'm going to do the inverse. I'm going to divide. And whatever I do to one side, I do to the other. Negative 16 divided by negative 16 is 1x. Negative 68 divided by 16. Well, negative divided by negative is going to be a positive. I will tell you, you could divide both of these by 4. And you get 17/4. So that's an acceptable answer. Okay. I could have started divide by 2 and then divide by 2 again. If in this case there were not given any fractions, if we had fractions in the problem, we should write our answer in fractions. But you probably could do a decimal. If you divided 17 by 4, you would get 4.25. I would accept that as well. The only thing at time I don't accept a decimal is if you're supposed to have fractions, or they start with fractions, you should end with fractions. Or if you have a non-terminating, non-repeating decimal that goes on forever. We don't want to round, we'll just leave it in decimal form. It's a lot, guys, I get it. But write it down, follow the steps, and you're always going to end up at things hopefully you're comfortable doing. So let's try another example. Okay. So this one here, I'm going to rewrite it again as addition. And I am going to put a little 1 in here. This is just something with my comfort level. Negative 1, and then we have x. Instead of saying minus 7, I'm going to say plus and negative 7. Keep, change, change. Subtraction is the same thing as adding its opposite. And then we have plus 5/3. I know, fractions, yuck. Doesn't mean we can't do them even if we don't like it. And then I have my 2 times the quantity x plus 9. All right, distribute, 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 distribute. We're in the simplify each side phase right now. So I'm going to go negative 1 times x, which is a negative 1x, plus negative 1 times negative 7 is actually a positive 7, plus my 5/3. That equals 2 times x, which is 2x, plus sign, 2 times 9, which is 18. All right, still continue to simplify each side. So if I look at the left here, I have my negative 1x, that there is no x term to combine it with, but I can combine 7 and 5/3. All right, so there's a couple different ways we can do this, you guys. I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to write this as 7 plus, and I'm going to rewrite 5/3 as 1. I take 3 out of there, I'm left with 2/3. All right, I'm going to rewrite 5/3 as 1 and 2/3. And if I break apart the mixed number like that, this becomes 7 plus 1, which is 8 and 2/3. Okay, let's just leave it for that for now. Again, we're probably going to have to change it to an improper fraction, but we'll get there. Over here, they're not like terms, so there's nothing to simplify. Okay, do you see? Back to a simplified on each side, x's on both sides. So let's get rid of the x's on one side. You know, I said I like to deal with x's on the left, but you know what? In this case, it's really easy just to add 1x to both sides. If you wanted to subtract 2x from both sides, you absolutely could. Okay, So that cancels out. I'm left with 8 2/3 equals 2x's plus 1x is 3x, and then plus 18. Two-step equation. I'm solving for 3x, so I need to get rid of the 18, so I'm going to subtract 18 from both sides. And that's where it gets to be a pain. I know. That cancels out, and I'm left with 3x equals this part right here. So I think what I'll do is I'm going to change this to an improper fraction now. 3 times 8 is 24, plus 2 is, right, 3 times 8 is 24, plus 2 is 26. So I get 26 thirds minus 18 over 1. If I make that into a fraction, I'm doing this part right here. So this 26 thirds, that's my 8 2/3. I'm subtracting 18. We do need a common denominator for adding or subtracting. So I'll times this by 3 and times this by 3. And this becomes 26 thirds minus 18 times 3 is 54 thirds. And if we do that problem, our denominator stays the same. 26 minus 54 is a negative 28. So negative 28 thirds right here. Now we have to divide by 3. Divide by 3, divide by 3, and I've totally just run out of room. Okay, so 3 divided by 3 is 1. So we have x equals negative 28 thirds divided by 3. So I'm going to write 3 over 1. Keep it, switch it, flip it. Okay, and this works out to be negative 28 over 9. Sorry, guys. I should have planned better and given you more room. Okay, here's what I want to take away from. There's nothing to reduce there. I'm pretty sure we get a repeating decimal if we divide that out because it's divided by 9. You know how to do each individual step. And as with everything, the more you practice it, the easier it's going to get. So just persevere and really write down these problems and take it step by step.